welcome to the Healing for the Heart podcast. We're really glad to have you with us, and this is our podcast that's people just like us. Today I'm joined by Hazel, and Hazel actually saw some of the stuff that we put out on our newsletter quite recently, saying if you'd like to come and contribute to our podcast, be a guest in our podcast, then get in touch. And that's exactly what Hazel did. She got in touch, and now here we are, and we're going to have a bit of a blather this afternoon and hear a bit from her, a bit of her story, a bit of how she's been involved with Healing for the Heart, and some of the stuff that she would like to get out there beyond the world of Facebook and onto our podcast channel. And so therefore, if that's something that you're interested in as well, and you want to be like Hazel, then give us a shout and come and join us on the podcast. We call it People Just Like Us because in actual fact, that's what it is. People just like us, just like you and me. So if you've got a story to tell, if you have something that you want to say about mental health, or if you're just really interested in coming and having a conversation and letting people know where you're at in terms of all things mental and emotional health, then please do come and have that conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight over to Hazel. Hazel, why don't you just start us off? Tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to be involved with Healing for the Heart.
Yeah, well, my name's Hazel, as you've heard, and I've struggled with my mental health probably since I was the age of about 12. I was first diagnosed with depression and I've had anxiety on and off, mostly on. Don't know that it ever really totally disappears, but you learn how to manage it. So I think it was when you were doing the SOZOs originally, that would have been a while ago. I came in for a couple of SOZOs and I found them really quite helpful. I loved the atmosphere and how relaxed it was, and I thought this was really good. I then trained to do the SOZO, and I just loved it, the freedom that it brought me. And when you changed to do the Sursha, I decided that I would do that as well, and I just loved what that did for me. And then I came to the trauma workshop and thinking that it would be lovely and good like everything else. And as you were talking and going through all the stuff, I found myself getting triggered, and the more stuff you were talking about different triggers and how people cope with things, I realised that, oh my goodness, I have a lot of unresolved trauma in my life, and it's probably about time that I start dealing with it. So I decided about 3 years ago now to sign up for my first course of counselling with yourselves.
Yep. And so, gosh, SOZO was a long time ago. That was even before we were Healing for the Heart as a charity.
Was it?
Long time ago. That's when we were still in White-Inch. I don't even think Healing for the Heart was a thing at that time. I think it was after that we actually became Healing for the Heart, and we changed to the Saoirse stuff. So that was ministry, very much pastoral stuff. And then you come in and you came for a block of counselling on the I didn't realise that the trauma workshop that you'd come to had actually
traumatized me.
I hope not. Brought a whole pile of stuff to the surface, and obviously you were keen to share that in terms of the support that you had and the journey that you've been on, which is obviously looking at you being a really profitable and good journey for you. Yep. Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
So just thinking kind of more broadly, maybe it tailors into your story as well. What would you say then, in your experience, are the biggest challenges for folks who want to improve their mental health and well-being, or who maybe have particular issues that they really struggle with? What do you see, over maybe partly to do with your own journey, but from other folks that you know, what are the biggest things that people struggle with in terms of support in there?
Yeah, I think that as soon as you start thinking about your mental health and start feeling that you might not be okay, or that you're feeling a little bit different, or your mood's not so good, the natural tendency is to kind of shut down and isolate yourself. And then you tend to be stuck on your own with all these negative thoughts or anxious thoughts going round and round your head. Whereas if you can even write down your thoughts or speak them out, talk to someone about it, then you realise that actually they're so much bigger in your own mind than they are when you speak them out. And you might realise that you're not actually the only one that feels like that there's other people that feel like that too. And just being able to connect with someone and share which to you might feel like the worst thing ever, because it's your feelings that you're carrying around, and realise that people still love you and still have compassion on you when you're sharing and being vulnerable with them. It can be really powerful and helpful.
Yep. So there's something in there about being able to get the stuff out of your own head, whether you're getting it out of your own head and onto the paper, or out of your own head in a conversation. That somehow, am I right in thinking you're saying that makes it more manageable?
Yeah, I think it breaks the isolation, and it helps. Even sometimes when you hear your own voice, when you actually hear yourself speaking the words, you see it differently,
Yeah.
and it helps you to feel connected and not feel so weird or so strange.
Yeah.
And then once you start speaking about it kind of breaks off some of the shame and the stigma that you might be carrying about it, and you can then look to get help about it rather than just keeping it to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's fascinating, the whole connection between the isolation and the disconnection, and actually the impact that has on people's mental health. I mean, even before we started recording this today, we were just alluding to the stuff of the pandemic and how there had been positive things, but obviously that disconnection for people during that. I mean, is that something that you've seen with people, that's actually impacted their mental health in not a good way as well?
Yeah, I think there's very few people that would think that the lockdown was a positive experience for them. I think we were under such incredible stress and pressure and having to live our lives in a way that we're actually not made to live our lives on our own and disconnected from the world around us, that it brought up a lot of things for a lot of people. And we all had to learn how to process our emotions and our feelings about what was going on in the world around us a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously for you, you're tying up for, in terms of your journey, the connection between that isolation and actually making your mental health issues feel worse than they were. And when you actually start to reconnect with people, or reconnect even with yourself by putting stuff on paper or with other people in terms of talking about it, that actually starts to alleviate some of the issues yourself without even doing anything with them, or even thinking you were doing anything.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think there's nothing worse than being stuck on your own. I mean, they put prisoners in isolation, don't they? You know, to deprive them of human connection and being able to express themselves in any way. And lockdown, I guess, felt a little bit like that for many people.
Yeah, and I suppose just even what you're saying, that although lockdown is the thing that sticks in our minds, and the pandemic and the disconnect that caused, I suppose what you're really saying is that you know, even before that, because you're the stuff that was coming up for you would have been before the pandemic, because in terms of the timeline of stuff.
Hmm.
So even before the pandemic, making that connection between the difficulty in terms of isolation and isolating yourself because of the stuff that's going on, and actually starting to feel that disconnect again, which impacts your mental health, which really is what
Hmm.
you're saying. So in terms of your own journey then, what do you think has been the pivotal moment for you on your journey? Maybe there's more than one, but what have been the pivotal moments or moment on your journey to well-being?
Yeah, well, I think when I started my counselling, I was going through a really difficult time. I was in temporary accommodation because I was getting work done in my house, and I was looking after my dad, who died at the time, just as we were getting into the pandemic. And I remember just being so grateful that you were checking in on me every week for our I just thought that I could totally lose my mind. You know, like, if I didn't know that someone was checking in with me and that I was being all right. So in a sense, I was almost thankful for just the rest and the reprieve for lockdown, just to give me a little bit of space.
Yeah.
And I loved being able to do it over Zoom. That was very helpful for me. I think that the couple of things that really stick out for me in changing how I viewed things, for me, growing up as a child, I wasn't allowed to express any emotion. You know, crying wasn't allowed. So for years and years, I had carried around so much trauma and grief and emotions and feelings. And whenever they came up, it would be totally overwhelming, and I wouldn't know how to deal with them or process them. And I never felt capable of doing it on my own. So as we I think you gave me a safe space and taught me how to be able to process things as they came up. And I didn't like it. It made me feel very uncomfortable. You'd look at the pile of tissue sitting beside me to see how successful the session was or not. But it taught me skills, coping skills, and taught me how to learn to process any emotions that came up, and journal emotions if things came up in between sessions. And just that actually emotions weren't that scary overall. I used to always say be curious rather than me avoiding and hiding from the feelings or trying to clean the house or do something to keep myself busy rather than actually feeling my feelings. Being able to feel how I was feeling and process that was really helpful. That was the main thing. And I think you did, when lockdown started, you did like an online retreat.
Yeah.
I don't quite know what that was called, but I remember, I don't even know who spoke, but I remember going for a walk at lunchtime during that and realising for the first time that how people had treated me in my life didn't denote my worth and value. That everyone has worth and value, no matter who they are or what they've done. They matter and they make this world a better place just by being in that. And that was totally just switched a light on in me, totally transformed me.
Fabulous. So really two huge pivotal moments then. You're just going back to the first one, that whole idea of the fear that sometimes we live with, that if we allow ourselves to feel anything, somehow we're going to be swamped by it. It's going to be too much and we're not going to be able to ever come back from it. And that fear often stops us from actually engaging with any feelings. But I think, and I'm quite sure we said this when we were working together, that whole idea that you can't stop just the negative emotions, you can't just keep them out of the way because you've got to flatline everything then. Yeah. And so even in the conversation today, it looks like maybe having come through the fear of feeling the feelings, actually, does that mean that you're able to feel feelings that are actually good feelings as well?
Yeah, I'm so much more joyful now. You know, people will say, oh, I knew you were here, I could hear you laughing. And, you know, that would never have been said about me before. But I had to process a lot of grief and a lot of sadness to get to that joy. You know, I wasn't a person that felt joy. I wouldn't even laugh at things on the telly or jokes or something like that because my emotions were so shut down. But I just loved being able to feel. And you know, sometimes the good and the bad things, you know.
Yep. So on the other side of it now then, would you say that actually riding those waves of emotion as you process the difficult emotions, would you say it was worth it?
Definitely. I feel so much freer now. Before it, I felt like I was carrying around a big heavy load with me. And there were times in the past, certainly when I was younger, where the feelings would come up and they would be totally unmanageable and I couldn't cope with them. So being able to know that, oh, actually, I am feeling this thing, being able to maybe talk to someone or journal about it and actually process it just makes such a difference. And you don't end up with that huge backlog or that heavy weight of horrible emotions weighing you down, which I had before.
Fabulous, that's amazing. And as I suppose the second thing that you were talking about there was recognizing that you had value, and that's a huge thing, isn't it? You had value and have value just because you're you, not because you've done anything or because you've been anywhere or you've achieved anything. You just have inherent value, and that's massive.
Yeah, it affects how I relate to people. I think before, when I was talking to people or even thinking about talking to people, because I was quite withdrawn before, I probably wouldn't put myself forward, or I would think that people wouldn't really want to know me or talk to me because of maybe some of my interactions with people before. But now I feel so much more confident, I think, and I am interested in people and able to have conversations with people and have friendships because I feel that I have something to offer and I know that they have something to offer too.
Yeah, that's just It's absolutely amazing. You know, it's like just hearing you speak, the difference is like night and day. It's fabulous, just amazing. So the question we always ask all of our podcast guests is the same one, and it's always the one we land on. So if you had a magic wand or fairy dust or something like that you could use to change something in our society or culture which would massively impact people's mental health and well-being, then what would it be? What would you change?
Yeah, and that is a big question,
That's a
isn't
big
it?
question.
Well, I've had this wee phrase that's been kicking around in my head most of the year. I think probably since we came out of lockdown, really, about everyone needs to feel seen, known, and loved. And I think, I mean, it practically should be taught in schools or in nursery schools.
Yep.
What a difference that would make if children growing up felt seen and known and loved. And if we learned how to love and honour each other and listen to each other and connect to each other, the world would be a totally different place.
Yep. Wow. Well, that's a big answer. It's as big an answer as the question is. That's absolutely fabulous. I think you're right. I think, and that kind of sums up even where you started in the conversation here about that disconnect. So being seen, known, and loved is actually all about connection, isn't it? And the power of connection that's there. And I wonder sometimes what the power of connection is in terms of helping to build our resilience. You know, so you're saying that all children should be taught that. And taught that in terms of for them knowing that they're seen, known and loved, but actually how they show other people that they're seen, known and loved as well. And I wonder what kind of resilience base that would build for us as a society if rather than knocking one another down, we were able to build each other up like that.
Yeah, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
It would be fabulous, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing. It takes real courage to come on and do this, particularly when it's your story you're sharing. And we really, really appreciate it. It's such a privilege to be able to sit with you and hear the story and hear. We don't always, with people who use our service, hear the next part of the story. We sometimes are only in this kind of difficult processing part, and it's just such a pleasure, such a joy to be able to hear part of the story that's the next part of the story, and I'm sure there's so much more story to come. I look forward to the next podcast to hear where you've got to then. So thank you so much for being part of what we're doing here in terms of using our media presence to be able to build people up. And I hope that as folk hear you, that's what they hear, and actually they can take some of that for themselves, that perhaps folk listening today will hear that they have intrinsic value just because they are, not because of anything that they've done or anything else, and that nobody can take that value away from them because they are valued, known, seen and loved. So thank you so much again. That is us for today as far as our podcast is concerned. And again, I would just invite you again, if you have enjoyed today's, make sure you share it with other people and let folks know that we are here and this is what we're doing. And if you want to get involved with us in any way, whether it's podcasting, volunteering or doing anything else, then you get in touch with us and we will be happy to steer you in the right direction. Have a great day, and we're glad you joined us on People Just Like Us.